Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ash and Stone channel. My name is Chris and today we're going to have a look at the new Stargrave Automatons. We'll start with a quick look at the frame and then go through how I painted these guys up. A big thanks to the team at North Star for supplying me with this box, and the miniatures within. Inside you will find 4 of these frames of automatons and 2 frames of 25mm bases. The automaton frame will allow you to build 5 of these cybernetic creatures with a wide variety of weapons, arms and heads, giving you 20 in total. Let's start with the torsos and legs, of which there are 5 in varying states of augmentation. They have mechanical legs or knees and spines and tubes, all grafted into the unliving flesh of their host. They'll make for a horrifying base to build these terrifying creatures on. There are 18 different heads to choose from, ranging from corpse-like to fully augmented, and a large range of arms with weapon options grafted into place. There are a good range of melee weapon options, including saws, clamps, blades, drills and shears, and a wide variety of ranged options, from small handguns and SMGs, through automatic rifles and shotguns, to the big boys like cannons and flamethrowers. Altogether, they allow you to make automatons, automaton soldiers and automaton butchers out of the pieces provided. Also included on there are 3 automites per frame, giving you 4 creature options from the one box set before you've even started kit bashing. So let's get some paint on these guys. I start with a black undercoat. It gives me a nice dark base to work from, and if I miss anything, it won't stick out too glaringly. For my Stargrave figures, I start with the base first, giving it a coat of Vallejo light grey. I'm going for a concrete slab here, as I felt that was a fairly universal base option for sci-fi figures, whether they're at an abandoned industrial zone, a moon base, space station, or cyborg factory. There's almost certainly going to be a concrete slab or 2 there. The light grey does not have to be a particularly even coat, as long as we've got some on there. On top of this, I apply Vallejo black grey with a sponge. I use a bit of the sponge that comes with the metal figures, dipping it into the paint, wiping off much of the excess on the palette, and dabbing it around on the base to give us random spots and patches. This is followed up with Vallejo Sky Grey, applied in exactly the same fashion. This gives us shadows and highlights and the semblance of stones at the surface of a concrete slab. This is a messy process and you are likely to get paint all over the figure's feet, hence why we're doing it first. We do the same thing with a bit of white, although this is applied much more sparingly as our brightest highlights and whitest stones. It looks like a bit of a spotty grey mess at the moment, so to bring it all together, we apply an uneven coat of Woodland Scenic's earth colour, concrete. This is a fairly transparent paint that will give us an uneven, dusty and earthy tone that helps to pull the previous colours together so they don't look quite so wildly different. This gives us a pretty good result as is, but to darken things a bit and age the concrete, I apply an uneven coat of Army Painter Speed Paint Gravelord Grey, occasionally dabbing it off with a paper towel. The Gravelord Grey mixes with the concrete earth colour as it's applied, blending the tones, and dabbing some off with a paper towel adds a quick and easy extra layer variation to the finish. That's the concrete done for now. We'll be back later on to add extra lines and stains to the surface, but that'll do as a base, for now. Time now for the automaton himself, and I'm going to start with the flesh. I use Vallejo Pale Blue Grey as a base, and it's applied all over the areas of skin in 2 coats. I'll be going for a pale purpley blue skin, as if the blood has been drained from the dead flesh and replaced with a more mechanically suitable coolant or hydraulic fluid-like substance. To give us our shading and that purple tint, I give the skin a wash using Army Painter Purple Tone. I mix this with water, about 50-50, to dilute the wash and reduce its strength, so that the final effect will be much more subtle. If I feel that it goes onto the model a little strong, I just add a little water to soften it until I'm happy. When that has dried, I go back in with the pale blue-grey and reapply the base colour, leaving the wash in the recesses. Finally, I mix a little white into the pale blue-grey to get myself a highlight, which is then applied onto all of the high points of the skin, such as the nose, upper lip, and the tops of the head and muscles. I also use it to highlight the edges of the skin where it interfaces with areas of metal, if I think it needs it. Speaking of which, let's do some metallics. I use Vallejo steel as a base. It gives me a nice even finish that's suitable for steel or aluminium or titanium or whatever futuristic material these guys incorporate. There are quite a lot of details on these guys to pick out, so I carefully inspect the model as I go to ensure that I haven't missed anything. When that's done, I use Speed Paint Grim Black over all of the metal areas. This will add excellent shading into the recesses and just generally darken things down, making the metallics look evil and suitably represent the oil blackened steel or aluminium. I apply it fairly liberally on the metallics, though being careful not to use so much that it spills over onto the skin. Making the metallics nice and dark will also help to contrast them with the lighter skin tone. I'm still using the original formulation of speed paints that suffered from the bleed through effect, so to add a protective layer between that and the following layers, I give the model a blast with Tamiya flat clear spray. Then it's time to hit the trousers, and I've chosen to go for yellow browns. On this model I'll be using Vallejo Desert Yellow as my base, and on other models I've been using green brown and Japanese Uniform World War II to add a bit of variation while keeping the models linked. I apply 2 coats to get a fairly even colour, although it certainly need not be perfect, and the yellow browns provide a nice contrast to the purpley blue of the skin. Army Painter Strong Tone is used as a wash for the short shorts, and it's applied liberally to give us shading on the material, and as a bonus, a splotchy and uneven finish. This uneven finish does a great job of weathering and aging the material, giving it a stained and worn look, as I don't imagine these drones take particularly good care of their clothing. I also splash a little bit onto some of the areas of metal, to give some spots a richer or even slightly rusty tone, though I'm much more sparing in my application here in order to keep the effect quite subtle. While I wait for that to dry, I use a little white to pick out the figure's teeth, and give that a quick shade with a little of our purple wash mix. Okay, that was a bit much, so I clean off my brush and then use it to suck out the excess wash. With the clothing now dry, I go back in with the Desert Yellow and pick out the highlights using small strokes of the brush. This gives me a bunch of fine lines, reminiscent of threads in fabric, and also adds to the worn and tattered look of the shorts. I focus these on the tattered edges and on the high folds of the cloth, leaving the wash in the recesses and as a mid-tone. Black is used next to tidy up and base coat the boots, belts, straps and buckles, as well as to pick out the details such as pipes or tubes in the skin, and what I like to think of as the rubber boots over the mechanisms of the elbows and back of the knees. I'm using black webbing straps and plastic buckles as inspiration here, rather than going for a rustic brown leather look. Black straps and belts also complement the yellow clothing and give the model an industrial look, as if these poor hosts were asteroid miners or some such before being consumed. I also pick out what I'm calling the heat shield of the gun. As being a future revolver, it's likely made of plastic polymer rather than metal. Vallejo Black Grey is used to highlight all of these areas of black, focusing on the edges and high points, leaving the black down in the recesses. Vallejo Scorpy Green is used as a base to add a splash of colour to some of the details. I use this to enhance the various pipes protruding from the miniature, and on others I've hit the occasional lens or light. Army Painter Dragon Red is used to base the other lenses or lights, especially the eyes, to add a little extra evil to the model. Then, to really make those areas shine, I use a little fluorescent paint. Green on the areas of green and red on the red, funnily enough. This just gives those areas a little extra pop and makes them stand out from the rest of the model that little bit more. Army Painter Warped Yellow is used, firstly to add some stripes to the tubing around the model's neck, further contributing to the industrial vibe. And it's also painted onto the concrete base to add a little bit extra there. Using yellow or white or red, you can paint on all sorts of industrial or road markings to jazz up the bases a little. In this case, I simply paint a yellow line and begin writing danger. A little AK light rust is applied sparingly to areas of the metal, adding a little bit of wear to the steel. This can also be applied in patches on the base to add a little rust staining to the concrete if you so desire. The model can then be given another blast of Tamiya Flat Clear to seal everything and reduce any unwanted shine from washes and the like. When that has had time to dry, I go back in with the Vallejo Steel. Firstly with a light dry brush on the areas of metal, where I can get away with not hitting anything else, and then more precisely to add some shine and scuffing to the edges, and bring the highlights out from the shadows. Tamiya Smoke is used to add a little spilled oil to the base, where it's brushed on in a little pool, and finally, to make this guy look even more terrifying, I crack out some Army Painter Dry Blood. This paint is a pain as it's textured and constantly blocks the nozzle of the bottle, but it gives you an excellent effect on the model. It's brushed on and around the saw and worked up the back of the arm to make a splattery mess. I stipple it up the front of the automaton's body and down his leg. I don't want him coated in the stuff, but a good bit of subtle splatter helps to sell the effect. I add a nice big splatter to the base, stippling in the rough shape with a fine brush, and then switching to an old tired brush to add finer spots. Most of the paint is wiped off on the palette as if you were dry brushing, and then a fine splatter is applied over the concrete in a stippling motion, and then over the model itself. By starting on the concrete, we can make sure we have the right amount of paint on the brush before we commit to the model itself. The thicker areas that we brushed on end up with a nice, gory, lumpy texture, while the fine splatters add a grim, misting effect. The edge of the base gets painted black to finish things off, and we are done. Ready to consume the galaxy, mechanical, technological, and organic alike. I hope that's been helpful and given you some ideas of what to do or what not to do with your own automatons. Thank you very much for watching, and a huge thank you to those supporters on Patreon. We'll see you next time. Cheers!